many places in my life, and I can honestly say that I am so proud to work at a place that finds itself at this moment in time as supportive and as genuinely in supportive community. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh, she's saying that because, you know, she works here and she's vice president and they pay her to say that. They don't. And I would like to tell you a little bit about how we got here, but first I want to tell you a little bit about me so that you'll know something about me as a person. I was born in San Antonio to parents who are Mexican-American who wanted nothing else for us except for us to get a good education because it would be the way forward for us to have a better life. And it worked. My mother and father both sacrificed to send me to really great schools. But from the very beginning, I had a little trouble in school. In kindergarten, I went to school all day. I'm an August baby, so I was a really young kindergarten. And in the afternoon of kindergarten, we took naps. And I was at a school that was fortunate enough to have cots to take naps on. And all of the cots were blue, except for two. Two of the cots were purple. And I remember distinctly, and it's okay, I'm not bitter anymore, but I remember distinctly wanting to sleep on a purple cot. And so I asked at the time, when is it going to be my turn to sleep on the purple cot? And the answer was, the cots are given out first come, first serve. So if you were standing in line and you were the first in line, you could choose a purple cot. But I was really short, so I sat in the front of the room. So I was never going to be in the front of the line to get the purple cot because they were in the back. And I remember thinking, this is not fair. I don't remember whether I slept in a purple cot, but I just wanted to tell you that even when I was 5 years old, I remember thinking things are not fair, and that's not right. Fast forward a few years, I was studying for the sacrament of confirmation. It was a Catholic school. When you're confirmed, you need to know the catechism of the Catholic Church. And at the time, this was a long time ago, the Catholic Church believed that when babies should be baptized because they could go to heaven if they died. And so they were telling us about this catechism, and I raised my hand and I said, well, what about if a baby doesn't want to be Catholic? well, how would they know? They're just babies, and then you're going to baptize them, and they're going to be Catholic, and then, what about if they don't want to be, and then, So I asked this question, and the nun, the sister at the front of the room who was my teacher, didn't respond. She left the room, and I'm standing there, and I didn't get an answer. I thought it was a really good question. I still do, as a matter of fact. She comes back a little while later. She's Gilda, get your things, go to the office. Your mother's coming to pick you up. Well, I still didn't know what I had done. But my mother was coming to pick me up, and I knew that that was trouble. And I get in the car, and my mother says, what have you done? And I said, I don't know what I've done. And she said, well, you must have done something, because the nun called me up and said, come and get your daughter. She's damned and going to hell. And I was 10. It's really not good for you to be Catholic at 10 and already damned and going to hell. It's not a good thing. So my parents said to me, there's only one solution out of this, and that's to figure out how you're going to say that you are sorry, and get back in their good graces. And of course, by that time, being 10, I was really happy to tell my mother, that's not fair, because I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sure that apologies were done because I was 10. But as I look back, there were many more instances where my last words were, this is not fair. One of them was after my older brother, who's a year ahead of me, and gotten a full ride to Notre Dame. I was thrilled for him. There was great excitement. He was the first in our extended family to go to college. How wonderful is this? My first thought was, now it's going to be my turn, you know, and a year later I would follow. So I told my parents, I'm going to go to Notre Dame too. And my dad looks at me. He's a sweet man. I love him dearly. He looks at me and he says, Mija, that's too far. And I said, what do you mean it's too far? My brother's going. It's not too far for him. It should be okay for me. And he said, no, you're a girl. And, you know, I mean, you have to remember the time. This was 1972. It was, and he was a very traditional Mexican-American man. So I understood what he was saying. He said, look, this is what you should do. You should go downtown in San Antonio and get a job at a bank. Because back then, banks were these beautiful buildings downtown, and you could work inside, and it's air conditioning. In San Antonio, that's a big deal. so you go to this bank and you get a job as a teller, because you can wear nice clothes. Because in his mind, if you could work inside, this was an advancement. So you work inside, you wear nice clothes, you live at home, you save money, and that way you get married. And you have a couple of kids. When your husband leaves you, you'd have money. And I said, wow, that is a terrible story. And it's not going to be my story. That doesn't compute with me. I mean, I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. I still didn't know too much about myself. But I knew it wasn't that. So I started to tell my dad, I'm sorry, Dad, I mean, the teller thing, I'm not that good at math. What's about this thing about my husband and the kids, and he leaves me, and I mean, what is all of that? I said, you know what? That's not going to work for me. And he says, well, you know, if you do anything else, you're going to be on your own. And of course, my response was, that's not fair. It shouldn't be that way. And looking back, I can tell you honestly, he meant that from his heart. In his heart, he wanted me to be just like his mother, you know, and he wanted me to be in the image of his mother, who was a saint, by the way. I love her, and she's great. She had 11 children, and she made tortillas from scratch every day. I love her, but I just didn't want to have her alive. So I see myself now when I look back, I see myself as saying, you know, I have to be who I am. And I was unfolding that as I was going along. When I went to undergrad, I majored in theater. That's another story. And then I was a coach and teacher for many years. And then I went to graduate school at what is now Texas State. And they told me at the time that there weren't very many women in athletic administration in NCAA Division I schools, and I didn't have much of a future in that. So I should really look for something else to do. And I said, well, you know, I'm going to climb that mountain anyway. But then it just didn't seem logical, because by that time I had started to know a little bit more about myself. I'd come out, even though it was tumultuous in my family. And then along the way, we started to think about having kids, which was, again, tumultuous with my family. But we moved along every time. When I started to do my doctoral work, I was at the University of Texas at Austin. I went to a lecture. It is one of those lectures that was life-changing. It was a lecture given by a woman who was on the cabinet of the University of Michigan as a lesbian. And she's one of the first who was out and a vice president at a university. And she was giving a talk about what it's like at that time, which was now like the early 90s, even then to be dealing with the dynamics of being lesbian and a university administrator. And she had a strong message, and one of her points was, please think about coming out. Please think about telling somebody about yourself. Because if more of us do that, it would make it easier for everybody. I mean, that was the time of coming out and doing that. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm doing my doctoral work, what is really important to me? And what was really important to me was making sure that things were going to be fair. I just wanted things to be fair. And I wanted them to be fair for everybody. So what could I do? So how was I going to sort of live my life after my dissertation? And that's when I knew that it was going to be, my life work was going to be about diversity, and my life work was going to be about making sure that things were fair. And I always thought about it then in terms of, this was my professional work. Because by that time I'd already, had all the talks with my family about myself, and so it wasn't going to be about me personally. I was going to be this vehicle. By that time, there were 2 kids with my partner. We'd been together 17 years. It was lovely. It was the white picket fence. It was everything. The little dog, the whole thing. That's when she told me she'd found somebody else. And in that moment, I was, besides being devastated, I was stunned that something could happen to me that was so deeply personal and so deeply painful. Not so much that she was breaking up with me, although that was difficult, but that because she was the birth mother of my children, I could lose them because there were no protectors. And so then I found myself at a place of thinking, oh my God, it's not over for me. This isn't fair. How can you leave and take the kids after we've done all of this? I mean, it was gut-wrenchingly hard to watch them go. And then I started to hear stories about this happening to others. I mean, we were right back in it again. This isn't fair. This is so fundamentally not fair. Just to let you know, it was very amicable, and I didn't have to be afraid of that, and I had joint custody of the kids, and it all worked out. But it doesn't work out for so many, even still. So the reason why I shared all of that with you is because that's the passion that I have for this work that I do. And of course now, I'm never too far away from the thought that things could still happen to me, and many, that are outside of our control, that leave you in a place that you say, things are just not fair. This is just not fair. So I can say this is my 13th year as a diversity officer in a higher ed institution, and I've done all of my work in Texas. So I can't say that we've done everything. There's still so much to do. But I can also tell you that anything that happens on my watch would not have happened without the 20 years or 30 years or 40 years before us of everybody fighting at a time when fighting took a lot more courage and there was a lot more risk-taking. And I am tremendously in awe of the people who have done so much work before. There's a lot more to do going forward. What I want to say though is we have to look for the windows, and I just want to share one story, okay, maybe two. Back a couple of years ago, there was a tragedy at Rutgers of a student who was killed himself as a result of this horrible thing that happened. And then coming out of that was an initiative that hit the internet called Wear Purple Day. The story I want to tell you about Wear Purple Day is what happened at the University of North Texas for Wear Purple Day. We had a brand new president, brand new. I was just getting to know him, and here's this opportunity, like, what are we going to do for Wear Purple Day? Should we do something? Could we mount this initiative so that we could have this show of support? And I went to the president, Lane Rollins, at the time, and I said, Lane, let's do something. And he said, absolutely. That's the first one. The next one was, so many people worked on what was going to happen. There were people writing statements for the president. There was, NTTV and the NT Daily, and the whole university was, they were gearing up. The statement that was written, they asked me to take a look at. Take a look at it, and then I remember hand walking it over to the president's office, and I said, okay, here's a statement. Why don't you take a look at that, and if you're good with it, could you sign it so we could publish? And he said, you know, Gilda, I'm really not comfortable with this. And I thought, oh, wait, yes, you're going to be, let's make you comfortable with it. So I thought maybe there might be some backtracking, maybe, I guess I'm always fearful of that. What he actually meant was, let's be more specific, not less. And in a show of tremendous support and courage, instead of saying sexual orientation, he spelled out the words gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual. And he made it very specific to say we will be treating everyone with respect. And it was published, it was beautiful. And the very next day, the day of Wear Purple Day, it just happened to be the day of a staff sack lunch. One of these days when the whole staff gets together in a room and listens to the president talk. When I walked into that room, it was a sea of purple. Oh my goodness, it was beautiful. And somebody walked up to me, and it was one of those things that I will never ever forget, and they said, I've worked here for a very long time, and there's never been a president who has signed a statement that included the words gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, ever. It was a tremendous, show of support in a way that the president didn't even know he was doing. He was a new guy, and that was very similar to the feeling I have at events like this, at the opening of our Pride Alliance room. Our non-discrimination policy has just been revised. The president has signed that. That includes sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, among many other things. So it does take leaders who will do this. It does take looking for opportunities. It does take people speaking up, and it is actually standing on the shoulders of giants who were so courageous, who got us here today. And so the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because for everybody it's about where their passion and their courage is. And for me, many people made this easy for me to do my work. What I would love to see, because I didn't even think I'd see this in my lifetime, but what I really want to hope for now is to live in a place where nobody ever has to say, that's just something